Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova to everyone. One of the numerous themes of Rosh haShanah is Yom Harat Olam, the anniversary of creation, the universe's birthday, if you want to put it that way. So we're all invited to the party, and that raises the inevitable question, what do you give a world that's already got everything? It seems to me that this year, one of the most important gifts that we could give the world is healing. If we look around, it's so thoroughly noticeable, not only that what the world needs now is love, sweet love, thank you, Mr. Bacharach, but that it is so desperately in need of healing. You know, everywhere you look, whether it's on Facebook, in the news media, you see people commenting about how 2020 or 5780 in the Jewish counting has been just an awful, difficult year for so many reasons. There's a global virus that cannot yet be contained. So many have already succumbed to its ravages, and by all indications, we're still in the first wave. Medical science is working hard, but they're not yet at the point of a breakthrough so that they can deliver healing. There are record-breaking fires burning vast sections of the West Coast that cannot yet be extinguished. They've turned the sky into an orange color, both night and day. So many people have lost so much and don't know where to go. Let's hope that they receive all the material and physical help that they need, followed immediately by the metaphysical, by which I mean deep and meaningful healing. In the southeast of our country, the annual parade of hurricanes across the Atlantic Ocean, then hopping over to the Gulf Coast and then making landfall. This parade is doing its best to impress us and show us all how it can outdo all the hurricanes which have come before it. For the people who live along this path, numerous times every single year they are forced to face the decision, is this the moment when we flee our homes? What do we possibly carry with us in our arms as quickly as possible to save? I cannot begin to imagine living like that. It would seem to me that there's almost a constant need for healing in that situation. Healing from the damage caused by the last one. Healing from the anxiety, almost a constant knot in the stomach in anticipation of the next one. And then, my friends, in so many streets across our country, from east to west, an ongoing attack on black people who are treated inhumanely, violently, murderously, and so often by police officers. You know, I sometimes think, or I look at the destructive energy of viruses, fires and hurricanes, and I think to myself, these are definitely some of the more brutal sides of nature at work. And granted, one might argue that both fires and storms have been measurably encouraged by the damaging changes to climate patterns caused by human beings. One might argue that the virus got out of control because of human inaction. Yet none of those elements of nature are capable of choosing to act with malice. Yes, they destroy, they consume, because that's their sole function, that's what they do, that's how they live. but there's no malicious decision-making going on there. I realize that that might be cold comfort to those who have suffered directly. But a knee in the neck for 7 minutes, 46 seconds is not nature at work. 7 bullets in the back of a young father climbing into his car with his children in the back seat. That's not an absence, a total absence of malice. This is America's original sin, to borrow an image from another faith. It's America's original sin of slavery, of a particular people, that continues to smile cynically at us, reminding us that a black person in the United States is still just a black person. It has been quite something for this white American to watch. This American who grew up in apartheid South Africa, where police brutality was so often not even reported because it was just so routine, it was so accepted. At times this summer, I felt like I've been watching replays of scenes from the evening news that I remember from my childhood. Statues of past oppressors being pulled down, peaceful legal marches in the streets being disrupted by the forces of law and order, or by clandestine mobs given carte blanche to brandish assault weapons. The difference is that in apartheid South Africa, people eventually said enough, and the country recognized that it had a problem that could not continue. It had a problem that needed to be addressed. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission was launched, where victims, or in many cases their survivors, faced their persecutors. They sat across from one another at a table, eyeball to eyeball, on national TV, and the persecutors were required to divulge every detail of what they did because that was their only opportunity to be awarded clemency by the new state. And even before that, it was agreed in Parliament that symbols of the racist past needed to be changed in favor of new symbols that included everyone. This meant that the apartheid flag, which symbolized a culture of racial superiority, was abolished. Statues honoring apartheid heroes who earned their reputations by devising methods to oppress black people, those were taken down. Those values of hatred of days gone by were offensive. They were not democratic, and they no longer had a place in the public square. Instead, they were placed in museums dedicated towards explaining hatred, with descriptions who these people were and what they accomplished. This was South Africa in the 1990s. In the 26 years or so that I've lived here, that I've chosen to make this my home, which means that I'm not just passing through, but that I'm committed to this place and to contributing towards its future. In these 26 years, it has so often occurred to me that we've still got a problem that we've not yet spoken about publicly. We've not yet addressed it and dealt with it once and for all. Racism in America didn't end the day that slavery was abolished. Neither did it end almost 100 years later when Rosa Parks boarded a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. It didn't end when 3 young men ate lunch at a Woolworth counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. We know that racism didn't end, because of the ongoing economic inequality on racial lines, because of the ongoing educational inequality, because of water inequality, because of voting access inequality, because of inequality in the eyes of so many police officers, and by no means all of them, but certainly too many of them, because of the inequality in the eyes of justice and the rates of incarceration that still persist, totally out of proportion, according to the race numbers in this country. And even if we didn't create those systems or proactively support and favor these problems, we benefited from many of them because of the systems that were historically created in this country that made it easier for white people to advance themselves. Systems that in many important ways depended on an institutionalized underclass. We've not yet dealt with this problem, and I recognize that my speaking about it is going to make some of us quite uncomfortable, and for numerous reasons. This is my perspective as somebody who sits on this fence between outsider and insider here in our country. It sometimes feels to me that merely speaking aloud about what is wrong in America feels like an attack on our country. This discussion will cause some people hurt and pain. Again, to me, it feels like we have a tradition here of a kind of super patriotism, where we need to see our country as the best, as number one, as already perfect. It's almost as if we lose something when we poke a hole or two in the facade of greatness. I see this, though I admit I don't fully understand what it's all about. But whatever its foundation, we have to move past our inability or unwillingness to discuss our problems. It's just not fair to those Americans who suffer most of all because of them. I think there's also discomfort with this topic because there is genuine fear among some that there are black nationalist or anti-white tendencies present in the leadership of the Black Lives Matter movement. And if I haven't fully or totally got my finger on that one, maybe I'm not analyzing it correctly, I think that what really bothers some of us about this movement is its historic support for blatantly anti-Israel BDS policies among the upper tiers of its leadership. I don't support BDS. I also don't think that Black Lives Matter is going to be the undoing of Israel. I think Israel has bigger issues to deal with. Neither do I think that most supporters of Black Lives Matter who are engaged with the movement because of its position against racism in America, I really don't think that most of them support or are possibly even aware of the anti-Israel stance hidden away in a platform that can be downloaded somewhere. Regardless, we cannot afford to use this as an excuse to not engage with Black Lives Matter, which today is the central address in this country for responding to the problem of racism here. Nelson Mandela's party, the African National Congress, had an alliance for decades with the PLO, before it was fashionable and acceptable for the Israeli government to speak directly with the PLO. But it didn't mean that South African Jews stayed away from the transition to democracy. Instead, they showed up, they engaged, they presented themselves as Jews and as Zionists and explained why those were good things, and they succeeded. We need to do the same. Friends, the High Holy Days, as many of you will know, is the time of year when we speak about teshuvah, repentance, which at its core is both an attempt to correct the mistakes of the past and also to heal the wounds which have been caused by those mistakes. Last year I had the pleasure of learning some of Maimonides' laws of repentance with some of you. We looked at the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, Hilchot Teshuvah, chapter 2. After the Kol Nidre service, we sat around and we learned the following. Halacha, which means law, number 2 on this page, asks, what is teshuvah? What is repentance? It is when a person rejects a sin they've committed by avoiding sinful thoughts and by resolving in the hearts not to do it again. As it says in Isaiah 55:7, the wicked should abandon their path. It is essential that they confess verbally, publicly, and acknowledge these things that they have resolved in their hearts. Halacha 3 tells us, anyone who confesses verbally and does not resolve in their heart to abandon or to reject sin, to change their behavior, this is like a person who who bathes in the mikveh, the Jewish ritual bath, to purify themselves while holding up an unclean object in their hand, which renders the bath not effective until they get rid of the unclean creature. And so it says in Proverbs 28:13, one who admits and abandons or rejects their sin is given mercy. And they must specify the sin. As it says in Exodus 32:31, the nation has sinned a great sin and made a golden god for themselves. It's not enough to say in hushed tones, we were wrong, we're sorry. We have to say it publicly. We have to say it so it can be heard. And we have to identify what it is that we have done wrong. One cannot become clean or pure as long as we insist on holding on to vestiges of sinfulness. Halacha 6 reads, it must be emphasized that even if a person restores, returns, repays the money that is owed to the person who has been wronged, that they must appease the person who has been wronged and ask them for forgiveness. Friends, our tradition makes clear what is expected of us in order to heal the wounds in interpersonal relationships between ourselves and family, between ourselves and friends, and by extension, between ourselves and our country. Wounds that endure because of age-old mistakes which have not yet been addressed publicly, out loud, and named. And also for some solution to be sought in order to move forward. We are taught by our tradition how to address this. Head on. We as Jews need to be at the forefront of making sure that those in our country who are still hurting because of wounds of racism, which have been carried in their families and handed down from generation to generation for centuries, that they receive the healing they deserve. We need to be clear. We need to be heard. We need to pay attention to what we as Jews have been taught that repentance and by extension national healing require, that we've been taught both from our ancient texts and also from our lived experiences as Jews. This is but the beginning of what our role in healing our country in the year ahead and beyond needs to look like. I myself, I don't have all the details. I don't know what American repentance and healing needs to fully entail. But I do know that as Jews, we need to show up. We need to walk side by side with our black sisters and brothers so that they know they are not alone, but that someone, a people driven by a religious mission to heal the world, Tikkun Olam, is by their side, just like it happened in the 60s. Regrettably, that struggle is not yet over, as John Lewis would tell us today. And we have to remain committed to seeing it through to its historic end. This is our duty as Jews in this country that we love and respect so much. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.